Thank you. Thank you. So I am before lunch, so I appreciate everybody who's willing to stay around and listen to me drone on about how the state of the law is screwed in this area and how we need to work together to make it better. First and foremost, I am Jonathan C. Dunsmoor. I'm a U.S. lawyer. Unfortunately, there is not an EU lawyer who would come up here and hang out with me and shoot the shit about why we need to fix a lot of things in this ecosystem. The first one right now being greed. But before we get into all of that, this is not legal advice. These are things that you should and should not do that relate to financial mechanisms, security mechanisms, commodities, intellectual properties, and a bunch of other fun things. But it is not legal advice. Wink, wink. Now, that being said, so in the US, we have three primary regulators that deal with these assets. We have the CFTC, the SEC, and a little organization called FinCEN that is under the Department of Treasury. Treasury maintains our federal system. We don't have a centralized bank. We have this conglomerate of really sketchy organizations. But the thing that really kind of gets this industry in a tizzy is picking which regulator you can basically become subject to. And that's where most people don't understand that they kind of get to pick their regulator. And it is a little nuanced. It does get really scary. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that. With the CFTC, one of my least favorite organizations, they believe that everything that is not Bitcoin is under their jurisdiction. That is ridiculous for a number of reasons, but first and foremost because they don't have the man or woman power to police it, right? And so when you go to the CFTC, whether it's through CFTC Labs or any other kind of organization that they pop up, and say, hey, we have this question, we want to do this thing, this is a cool product, and we want to offer it to everybody. They go, cool, we don't know how to tell you to do that. And the lawyers in this space will also tell you the same thing. So be very careful if you receive anything from the CFTC because it is bound to get sticky for you. But the good news is you cannot regulate a commodity. You can't register a commodity. I can't register oil. I can't register wood. Technically I can't register onions under an exemption from the Commodities Act, but that's a whole nother issue. So the good news is if you do have a token or you do have a protocol and they come after you, you have to ask yourself whether you're an exchange or not, because they do regulate exchanges and commodities traders. So be mindful of this. These are the questions that you need to ask your lawyer because I am not your lawyer right now. All right? Now with the SEC and their Howey test, I'm sure if anybody wants to spout it out, we can. But it is an investment of value, right? Not just money, ETH, Bitcoin, whatever we want to throw in there, the real estate, before all this stuff became popular. In an enterprise can be a garage band full of dudes and chicks trying to accomplish something, or it can be a multinational conglomeration. And then it's in at the bequest of a third party. So the asset gains in value because of the actions of a third party. That's the three primary tests. There's technically a fourth part, but it doesn't really matter because that's the only thing that really matters. And so, unfortunately, the best example for this is an arcade. If I have an arcade and I'm out here on the street and I'm saying, hey, purchase my arcade token, come get it right now, I'm selling it at a discount, but there is no arcade, guess what? That's a security. However, if I have one arcade, if I have one laundromat, or if I have one machine where that token actually goes into the machine and makes the functional mechanism work, that is no longer a security. So I am actively participating and using a non-security to engage in whatever mechanism that is. Is everybody following with me? I'm getting some nods and I'm getting some like glazed eyes and things like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to shout it out. This is all right. You can't register a commodity. Register. So I can't go register wood, right? I can't go register oil. But I can register the trading of the oil or the traders or the exchanges that trade. Okay, sorry about that. So that being said, that is what we're looking for from a security standpoint of, is there a functioning mechanism that makes the token or coin work within the system? If there is, then that's the first hurdle of Howey, of getting over that hurdle of saying, I am not a security because I have a functioning mechanism. Now, on to FinCEN. FinCEN is very scary because FinCEN, if you mess up with FinCEN, they report you to a little organization called the DOJ, the Department of Justice. That's where they deal with the real baddies of money laundering, criminal enterprises, go after terrible things like Tornado Cash, and we'll get into that. And so, when dealing with FinCEN, what you're looking for is, am I acting as a form of currency? Am I, transacting in value? Does this have some type of asset risk that could possibly piss off the Federal Reserve? If the answer is yes, you need to then understand, okay, am I holding custody of this asset? Is this asset on my books, dear FTX, or is it on some smart chain or protocol level kind of thing where it's out of my custody? Now, for those people who are clearly smarter than me in this, when you get to the code level and you can start monkeying with the code, things get weird. But at this level of the game and this level of the law, this is where we're at. If the code is out there and everything is functioning properly and you're able to transact and you don't have custody of that asset, guess what? You don't need a money transmission license. And let me tell you folks, you really don't want to have to deal with the money transmission license problem right now, because that's what FTX had. They had a shit ton of money transmission licenses, and right now, that little loophole is completely and utterly fucked. You don't need. If it's at protocol level, you don't need, because you don't hold custody of the asset, right? If I have Bitcoin and I want to send you Bitcoin, that's just going from me to you, right? Yeah. That's as long as it's in the contract and you as either the developer or the company don't have access to pull the funds, then you don't have custody. Now, like I said, that gets a little bit murky as it gets down into the minutia of being able to change the code, but right now we're sticking at the high level where the regulators are at. We don't want them to go down to like, oh, all the core developers can change it and then, reissue or do things like that. That gets down, like I said, too deep right now. But I like where your head's at. And those are the questions that you need to be asking, because if it does become a situation where, hey, we have X number of hundreds of millions of tokens, we want to rehypothecate new ones, or we want to burn these all in some, backdoor mechanism, then you're going to have a hard time arguing, to a regulator, we didn't have custody. We just burned everything and reissued it, right? Now, could you do it in a different mechanism of saying, hey, you post it up here, you stake it here, and then we rehypothecate in another way? Possibly. The answer is, the famous answer in the law is it depends, So going back to FinCEN and the money transmission issue, that loophole is now, like I said, completely fucked, because everyone who submits one of these things, and in the US, technically there's 53 different applications. There's a little group of, I think, 22 states that allow you to submit one application. But all of those applications are probably at this point going to be thrown in the trash because they have questions about who the hell has custody. And so when it comes to that virtual currency side and the use of sexes and the money transmission license, we're all just literally about, 2 weeks ago, just taking that entire thing and throwing it in the trash and lighting it on fire. So all of that area of the law is going to be different. And we don't know how different, because at this point, it was like playing Pokemon that was really tough and really miserable. And it got better. People started understanding how this stuff worked. But then now with this issue, the game has completely changed. So if you're building on that side of things, for the love of God, don't let that little greedy bug get you, because once it does, once the VCs or anybody else kind of gets into you, you just start going crazy and you start thinking that you're God, or I don't know, some type of greedy little shit. And the next thing we know, we're dealing with this kind of stuff. And we've had to deal with this twice in 1 year. And let me tell you, from a legal side of things, it is chaos. So that leads me to my, let's say the one of the more innovative sectors of the law right now, believe it or not, is the NFT side of things. And I know people will laugh and joke because NFTs are, NFTs. But from a legal side of things, if it is an intellectual property and I have some monkey on there or some, dinosaur or whatever it is, and I have purchased that. I have purchased that entity or that image, whether it's actually, just a JPEG or it's actually on IPFS or whatever, we're working on that kind of fun stuff. But that means I actually have some type of bona fide purchase. And that's where things get really exciting from a security standpoint or non-security standpoint. Because if I do have, let's say, some type of organization that I want to build or something that I want to create, whether it's DAO-esque, and we'll get into DAOs in a minute because I've got 9, or it's something, really new and novel and something that scares the shit out of even me, right? So we're using NFTs as a funding mechanism because it falls outside of the realm of securities because you're getting something. It's similar to like a non-equity Kickstarter, right? Hey, pay $25 for this hat. You're part of the Cool People Club. The Cool People Club are going to do cool people shit, and we are going to try to make more cool stuff, right? You don't want to overpromise stuff. You don't want to get to the point where, nobody reads the terms of service. I have a very funny story of how Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, said that personally in this little speech in Buffalo, New York, that he didn't even read it. And I said, who the hell does? So us lawyers still use the terms of service, and we still have to put that in there, but be mindful that that is where things are going to get weird when it comes to your NFTs. So if you do have an NFT project, for the love of God, have a terms of service. I don't have to write it. You ideally need some lawyer to write it, but you need to have something there. Even if you copy and paste it and steal it from Hugo or somebody else, hey, I didn't tell you to do that, but look at it. You know what I'm saying? If it's similar, it might work. Now, that being said, the NFT space, like I said, is very innovative. You have to look at your commercial rights. You have to look at your private rights. Do I get to display this? Do I get to make monkey t-shirts? Do I get to go hang it out on a banner out front? All of that is good and exciting, but at this point, in the precipice of globalism, we have no idea what it means around the world to see, oh, I have commercial rights in the United States. Does that mean I have commercial rights in Antigua? Does it mean I have commercial rights in Brazil? All these other fun things. So that's where your terms of service comes in, and that's why it's really important for you to understand what the hell you're doing when it comes to your NFTs. So for the love of God, please just be aware of that. Like I said, I can give you very good resources if you're in the EU for people to help you figure that out. But right now, that is our biggest hurdle and is not something that we're able to address readily. It's a nightmare. Now, on to my favorite topic, primarily because it is the scariest topic, is DAOs and DeFis. DAOs and DeFi are terrifying for a number of fun reasons, but we're going to start off with DAOs. If I have a decentralized autonomous organization, I'm really curious about the autonomous part, but for the most part, it's anonymous, not autonomous. But when you have a group of people who are going into an enterprise together, under the law, that's called a partnership, right? And if you are a partnership, at least in the United States, and one of you screws up, Bob goes and takes the company van and gets in a giant wreck and kills a bunch of kids or something terrible, right? And you're in a partnership and you don't have officer and director liability insurance, or you don't have, even an entity, right? You don't even have a basic LLC, then it becomes this issue of, guess what? Everybody in that partnership with Bob is now fucked. And I mean that. Because whatever that accident cost, they're going to go then after all the other partners, right? They're going to say, hey, John was a part of it. We're going to go sue John too, right? So when you're getting into a DAO, and don't get me wrong, I think the DAOs are literally a future of democracy. We've seen that we've seen that shaky son of a bitch just get to the edge of the line right now, right? So we do need some form of democracy. We need to have, I want to be able to vote on the commode, right? I want to be able to, be in the bathtub and be able to vote on things that matter, whether that is my actual, national election or that's a midterm election or who knows. But at this point, when it comes to DAOs, you have to look at what your entity is. You have to look at what your jurisdiction is. You have to look at what you're doing. If you're an entity and you have a proper structure, whether that's an LLC, a corporation, or some other new and novel thing that a new country comes up with. For example, the UK is really trying to vie for the king of DAOs right now, which is awesome and terrifying given their history of money laundering. But, all things considered, I do think that having something is better than nothing. And so be mindful of that when you're playing with DAOs. If you're using an ENS address and you have some asshole lawyer say, hey, wait a second, this person has an ENS address and they're part of this DAO and they've got 4 million in ETH, guess who I'm going after, right? I'm going to try to find out who that is because that's going to be the person who's going to be liable.
In legal terms, what qualifies entering the DAO where everyone should be?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, what is the what makes someone enter the partnership, right? Yeah. So I say that it's an affirmative act, right? You have to be able to participate in some form or fashion, whether that is valuable consideration, meaning that, hey, I've voted, I've put ETH in, I've put, some type of boop into the system. We don't know. A lot of that world hasn't been litigated against, which is why, like I said, it's pure nightmare fuel for me. Because from a legal standpoint, I know people that have Esquire after the name that are truly assholes, and they will say, oh, .eth address. Oh, I know who that is. I can find that person. Oh, they've got bags. Let's go after those bags, right? And as we've seen with Tornado Cash, it doesn't matter how digitally native you are. If they can find you, they will throw your ass in jail and hold you in contempt until you give them whatever the fuck they want. That's what they did with Kim.com, right? Put them in jail. Give us the money. We'll let you go, bro. So just be mindful of these things. We still live in an analog world. And when the analog world has to come get you, it's generally physically, and it's not fun. So be mindful of that. Now, as it relates to DeFi and all this kind of crazy thing, the biggest thing with DeFi right now is know your customer and anti-money laundering. And I know people are going, wait a second, that's traditional banking stuff. Why are you talking about that with DeFi? Because that little organization, FinCEN, is looking at it. That's why Tornado Cash and all the other protocols are starting to have the headaches that they are, because there's a lot of baddies out there right now. And they're using these types of protocols to see if they can get around sanctions or they can get around U.S. participation in FedWire or all these other issues. So the best thing about DeFi is also the worst thing from a governmental standpoint. And that's where we get into a position of, what are we doing at the DeFi level? Does it make sense? Are we able to at least identify some of the participants? And if not, what are the on and off rails in fiat? Because that's what I believe, at least personally and professionally, and what I tell the regulators is monitor the on and off rails and you'll be able to find the bad guys. My government, the United States government, loves doing dirt in fiat. You know why? Because it's not really traceable. It's really tough. And you know what? The average criminal loves doing dirt in fiat because it's not really traceable. Anybody who does dirt in Bitcoin knows. The FBI has personally told me the FBI loves Bitcoin because they can trace that anywhere, right? Now, getting on and off of it, that's a little bit more tricky. Oh, sorry. Are there any questions? I got about a minute left. Have I scared everyone yet? Yeah. That's a great question. How do you exit a DAO? So if you've already participated, right, and you've already voted or you've already contributed something and you want to remove yourself from the DAO, leave the partnership, so we'd say. I personally at least believe, not professionally, but personally believe, so this is not professional advice, is that anything that you would do to take that affirmative action, right, of I've contributed ETH, I've done so and so, I would try to reverse that. You can't reverse your vote. You can't do those types of things. But by leaving and removing yourself from Discord, any type of the voting mechanisms, anything that you've signed, unsigning yourself or unauthorizing yourself or whatever. Those are the types of things that you would have to do. And then, like I said, don't use, as much as I love the ENS people, don't get me wrong, I think that's brilliant. Don't use those for the dirty DeFi things that you guys do. It really, really makes dirty lawyers' job easier. And we've seen those this year of, hey, wait a second, you were involved in this. You have, X number of million in ETH. We want to talk to you about what participation your client had in a DAO. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, they didn't participate at all. Prove it. But as you know, stuff's on chain and pretty easy to prove. Yeah.
Do you have any comments on MiCA and European regulations?
Yeah, so MiCA is, I can't remember what it stands for, I'm terrible with acronyms, but MiCA is the EU's version of trying to resolve all the problems that we have right now. We haven't even got to the future problems, and thank you for pointing that out. MiCA is a very good step. The European lawyers that we work with say MiCA is basically kind of what they've been waiting for and looking for to basically solidify everything around EU regulations as it relates to basic fungible cryptocurrency. Now, what MiCA does not do, and what they're now taking comments and everything, which is very important. Thank you. I didn't even plan this, but look it up. Look up MiCA, and I can't remember the governing organization, but if you search MiCA, it has their comments. And so if you are in DeFi, if you are dealing with NFTs, or you are dealing with DAOs, submit a comment to them. Preferably after speaking possibly with counsel and maybe not removing any identifying information, but talk to them about, the actual boots on the ground and what you're building or what you're seeing or what you're doing. So when they do come out with regulations, that it is not garbage regulations, because the only thing, the problem with MiCA right now, and we haven't seen it in practice, of course, is that it does not address DeFi, it does not address DAOs, and it does not address NFTs, but they are far better than the USA.
Just a second follow-up question. Just a quick comment. FISMA, DG FISMA is the organization you're looking for to provide comments, and if anybody wants help there, I can help.
I like this guy. We didn't even plan this.
Second, quick question about liability for DeFis. Who is liable? Is it the user, as you mentioned, the partnership? Is it the coder that actually built the code? Is it the founder of the company that pushed for this thing to happen? Is it all people together or none?
It's the lawyer answer. It depends, right? The problem that we've seen right now in this great swath of industry, right, is there's either a hack or it's greed. And if the hack was, we did the best we could, we took reasonable steps, we had everything audited, we battle tested it A/B and blued that motherfucker until it was red in the face. Nobody could break it. And then some kid from Argentina cracks it and then drains you. You're going to be less liable than, had you not taken those steps. So it's a reasonability standard, at least in the United States. Now, when it comes to, negative, greedy, rug-pulling action, lawyers are going to go after anybody with bags, generally. If you can get somebody who was part of the DAO that has bags and has an ENS address, then they're probably going to get at least a subpoena. Will they be able to find them? Will it be something that they chase you down all over the world? It depends on how bad the issue is.
So from a DeFi protocol point of view, is there any difference or less liability if you just release a piece of code that performs a functionality, let's say a swap, but you are not taking any fees or profit from it? It's just a piece of open source software, both the contract and the UI? Versus there's a DAO or whatever, and I'm actually getting money from it. And does one need more legal structure than the other, or it doesn't matter because you just build a tool that people can use?
That's such a great question. So, when it comes to swapping, when it becomes you and I exchanging, and there's, Uni or something in between, some type of DEX, it's just pure code, that doesn't need a regulator because it's just you and I flipping coins, right? Now, if you do take a fee or you do have some type of VIG in between, especially if it's a percentage, then that's where things get weird, right? So if you have 1% fees or you have 2% fees or things like that, things can start getting a little murky, and they can get a little murky fast. MiCA tries to solve a little bit of that in some of their, back-end comments, but we don't know is unfortunately the answer. Is right now, if you're writing anything on chain and you're open sourcing any type of protocol or you're open sourcing anything, I would try to remove everything that you can from that identifies you. Especially if it's something where there are questions similar to Tornado Cash or some type of swapping mechanism where there is a fee or there is some type of economic incentive. That's a really good point, because the library decision that happened, I think last week, all these days are blending together, they focused on how much money they claimed they were going to be making and how rich everybody was going to be. And so one of the things excuse me, when you talk about your arcade or you talk about your laundromat machine, you cannot talk about how much money you're going to get out of it. There's no pictures of Lambos and money in the air and all that kind of fun stuff. It's just pure mechanisms. That's it. If you talk about how much investments and how much return on investments or how much, all of these things are going to make you, then you're going to probably have more problems. Because while I disagree completely with that case, the analysis of saying how rich you're going to get does make us look pretty stupid when we're saying, oh, it's not a security, it's just a token. So, anything else? Oh,
yeah. Hey, what's your view on wrapping the DAOs in, I don't know, what I have been seeing is that they wrap it in a Cayman Island company foundation, and then all the members of...
Ask the Bahamas. Yeah, ask the Bahamas. Bahamas are about to get wrecked by the U.S. government. Yeah. What the Bahamas knew and didn't know is going to be a question behind closed doors that we're probably never going to know the answer to, but I imagine that they're going to get their ass chewed, because that's where FTX was home based. Now, should some of our regulars had paid a little bit more attention to what was going on, CFTC? The answer is probably yeah. But we like to point fingers at the U.S., or in the U.S., we like to point fingers at others. So if you are in a small island nation, or you do have some type of exemption that is not a MiCA exemption or within those regulations, then you have to ask yourself, is this something that they're still going to bow to the U.S.'s authority? And the answer is generally yes, because what's going to happen is they're going to say, look, if you don't listen to us, we're just going to cut you off from U.S. Fedwire, and then you're not going to be able to transact. And all centralized banks are going to go, yeah, we're going to turn them over. Here's their address. Here's, they like going to the coffee shop down the road. Like, go get them. So just be mindful of that. I'm not saying there's not some good rappers. I'm not saying there's not some good organizations that are trying to utilize local laws to make sense of this area, right? We use Wyoming a lot because Wyoming's the only one who are really kind of sticking their neck out saying, hey, this is a utility token. But there's also a lot of, I don't want to say less than desirable, but less than desirable island nations that are saying, hey, we believe that we can facilitate these needs better than others, and we're not really caring about the KYC element, which is what I was saying is really important for the DeFi stuff. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Anything else for lunch? Yeah?
So for something like Uniswap, where the developers actually can't influence it, one concern people have is that regulators will look and they'll say, well, actually, like the validators on the network are the ones who should be enforcing KYC, AML, and protocols like that. Do you think there's a risk of that? Do you think regulators even know that validators are a thing? And do you think the base layer is decentralized enough to resist that?
I think so we didn't talk about one big baddie that scares us all, is the IRS, right? And the IRS now has these new reporting requirements of any transaction over $650. I'm supposed to get your identifying information and all this other stuff. Everybody who's ever made a transaction in Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything knows that that's absolute and utter bullshit. I'm not going to go get your SSN or your address or your full name. Come on. So unfortunately, the answer is we're in that like uber area of gray of like, we recognize the taxi companies are pissed off and they're angry at us and we're not necessarily paying all our taxes and stuff, but this is protocol level stuff. There's certain things that we can influence and there's certain things that we can't. Now, does that mean that they're going to go shut down Uniswap offices and there's a clone that pops up? Who knows? Because Pandora's box has been opened. There's not much of this that they can reel back in. They can hurt us. They can kneecap the shit out of us. And they probably will after this. But I don't think that they can put all this back in the box. I think we all recognize that this stuff has its benefits. I think that if you put enough my silly saying is if you put enough monkeys on a blue little rock and they start communicating, they're going to have to start making sure that those communications are trust. Or there's a level of trust between them. And I think the blockchain creates that trust, whether that's a financial trust or whether that's a messaging trust or some other type of trust. We need to have that. We've seen that with the last election cycle in my country. We've seen that around the world in different election cycles. We need to verify misinformation and disinformation and all these other things. I think blockchain eventually gets us there, but right now we need to monkey with it and figure out what works, what doesn't work, what's going to break, and what ultimately may be successful. So unfortunately, the answer is, we don't know yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Time to get lunch? All right, guys. Thank you for listening. I appreciate everybody. Have a good night.